Welcome to this week's workplace series. Today, we're talking about influence, but not just how you influence, how your team influences. So think about this. Have you ever had a time when it looked like things were going okay, but when you kind of started to dig beneath the surface, you realized things weren't going according to plan? Everything was just taking longer. There were roadblocks, unexpected little hurdles that you needed to get across. Everything just seemed to be getting in the way of progress. If so, you're not alone. Now, I recently worked through this issue with a client, so I'm sharing this story with their permission. On the surface, the team was collegiate. There were no obvious signs of dysfunction. However, the team wasn't progressing as swiftly as expected, as they were working through a complex manner. Something just wasn't working, and the leader couldn't figure out why. So we looked at the situation, dissected it, examined it, looked at the context, looked at who was involved. We worked through the usual suspects that can impact team dynamics. So we looked at things like ineffective communication across the team, because, as we all know, lack of communication can create a breeding ground for misunderstandings, misalignment. Was there a lack of interdependence? Because once again, we know that successful teams have strong connections, strong accountability points. They know the role that each person plays in contributing to success. Was trust low or just absent? Once again, because we know that if trust is low or not effective, then the team's not going to connect and engage well. Was there a lack of accountability? Was there a culture of blame? But as we went through each of those issues, none of them resonated. So we then examined how the team works with its stakeholders across the organisation. And it turns out that's where the issue lay. The team worked well together, but they weren't effective in navigating the complexity of the environment in which they worked in influencing stakeholders across the organisation. And as a result, the leader was having to step in and spend a lot of time getting into meetings, resolving issues, negotiating outcomes on issues, all of which elevated the amount of time that things took, but also meant that the leader was involved in a whole heap of things that, if the team had been effective at influencing, they wouldn't need to get involved with. It turned out that the team were great technical expert, but they weren't effective at influencing stakeholders. The whole story is just a great reminder. Leaders can't make progress alone. The less effective your team members are in communicating, building constructive relationships, and negotiating outcomes, the more you're going to spend time intervening, removing roadblocks, negotiating outcomes, all of which consumes time in an environment where time is always in short supply. In contrast, when you've got an influential team can cut through noise. It can get traction. It can collectively manage change. It can have a robust, sustained, and healthy impact. And influential teams do this by knowing how to collaborate effectively, by positively impacting the people and the outcomes around them. They understand the influencing factors that operate in the system in which they work. That means they've got that nous to be able to find their way through the back door, which sometimes you need to find if you want to get decisions made. There are informal networks in organizations, and your team needs to know how those informal networks work. And so the leader recognized that they needed to build an influential team. And they accepted that having influence isn't just about hierarchy and where you sit within the organization. And, sure, there is positional authority in more senior roles, but having that skill and that ability to influence is something that all team members need. So where did we start? We started by really examining those gaps, identifying the pinpoints. Where was the team positioned now? Where do we need them positioned in the future to be effective? And then there was capability that sat alongside in terms of elevating that capability. And also the leader played a role in coaching and nurturing the capability in the team. There was a focus on building healthy, dynamic stakeholder relationships, creating coalitions of support, learning how to communicate in an authentic manner, and learning how to negotiate. And not just important decisions, but negotiate even the everyday decisions. And with these skills in place, the team was then able to build those stronger, mutually beneficial relationships that help them get things done, help them progress. The team also, and this is really important, spent time getting clear on what mattered to them and how and where they wanted to progress. And that's important because influential teams strive to serve the greater good. And one of those things to do that is knowing how to stand out without making it all about you and all about your needs. It's about acknowledging the efforts of others, acknowledging the contributions of others, treating everyone with respect, seeking to deepen relationships by really understanding and welcome diversity of thought and different ideas and different perspectives. It's a great reminder, influence matters, but this isn't about influence that is just self-serving. It's influence that achieves change, that benefits all. And look, we all know that we are living in a changing world. There's no doubt about that. And your ability to progress is impacted by your response to change that's initiated by others and your capacity to motivate others to respond to change that you initiate. So my question for you, when you look at your team and the effectiveness, or perhaps the lack of effectiveness of your team, where does influence impact? Where does it play a role? And is it that perhaps you need to spend more time building the ability, the capacity, and the effectiveness of how your team turns up, shows up, and influences? If you want to talk about this, please get in touch. Always happy to hear ideas and to share thoughts. Take care. Have a great week.